1. Isaac Yankem. Long before Kane was setting the ring on fire, Glenn Jacobs had one of the weirdest and most forgettable gimmicks in WWE history. He was a sadistic dentist named Isaac Yankem DDS. The gimmick was exactly as dumb as it sounds. Yankem came to the ring with a snarl, unkempt hair, and supposedly horrible breath. He was Jerry Lawler's personal dentist who doubled as a wrestling monster. WWE wanted him to be scary, but the fans were just confused and didn't take him seriously. Yankem's matches were awkward, the promos were cringy, and the entire thing felt like it belonged in a cartoon, not in a wrestling ring. As a result, WWE quietly pulled the plug after a few months, and luckily for Glenn, he was repackaged later as Kane, one of the greatest gimmick recoveries in wrestling history. 2. Repo Man. Imagine a man in a Lone Ranger mask sneaking around the ring like a cartoon villain and claiming he's repossessing items in a wrestling match. That's the Repo Man. Yep, that was an actual WWE character in the early 90s. He wore a trench coat, had tire treads on his gear, and constantly laughed to himself. He was exactly like a cartoon henchman from a cheap movie. The Repo Man would cut promos about stealing cars and taking back unpaid property. None of it made any sense in a wrestling setting, and the fans couldn't have cared less. Instead of getting heat, he just confused people, and they started booing the hell out of him. Because of this, the Repo Man's feuds were extremely short and forgettable. WWE eventually dropped the gimmick and never looked back. Repo Man was supposed to be funny or intimidating, or both, but he ended up being neither. 3. Gobbledygooker. It's hard to put into words just how badly this one landed. In 1990, WWE hyped up a mysterious giant egg that was sitting ringside for weeks. Fans thought it might contain a new superstar, maybe a returning legend, or maybe even a title reveal. But what came out of that egg on Survivor Series night was a man in a giant turkey suit, flapping, dancing, and gobbling. He was the Gobbledygooker. The crowd in Hartford fell completely silent, then started booing him. Some of them were even yelling, "What the hell is that?" on camera. The poor guy inside the suit tried to dance and act like it was fun, but there was no saving it. This wasn't funny or cute, it was straight up embarrassing. Vince thought it would be a hit, but it became one of the biggest laughingstocks in wrestling history. WWE dropped the Gooker almost immediately and didn't mention it again for years. 4. Kerwin White. In 2005, WWE gave Chavo Guerrero a proud Latino wrestler from one of wrestling's most legendary families, a gimmick where he denounced his heritage. He dyed his hair blonde, came out in golf clothes, and started calling himself Kerwin White. His catchphrase? "If it's not white, it's not right." It was supposed to be satire, but it landed horribly. The crowd didn't know whether to boo him or just look away. To make things worse, he'd come into the ring in a golf cart, talk about country clubs, and wrestle as if he was some middle-aged suburban dad. After the tragic death of Eddie Guerrero later that year, WWE dropped the character immediately. Chavo returned to being himself, and no one ever spoke of Kerwin White again. It's one of those gimmicks that should have never left the brainstorming room. 5. Mordecai. In 2004, WWE got bored of their roster, so they introduced a bizarre character, Mordecai. He was an extremely pale man dressed in priest-like robes who talked about punishing the sinners. The lad also talked a lot about Judgment Day, as if the world was ending. The entire gimmick made the fans curious at first. They wondered if Mordecai was going after the dark, demonic characters like Undertaker. However, that illusion was soon shattered when Mordecai made a complete mockery of himself. He wrestled a few one-sided matches, looked awkward in the ring, and then disappeared just like that. Backstage reports later revealed that the guy playing Mordecai got into some legal trouble and the gimmick was quietly dropped. WWE didn't even bother to explain it on TV. 6. The Shockmaster. Probably the dumbest entrance a character has ever made. In 1993, WCW hyped up a mystery man for weeks as he was scheduled for a big tag team match. The moment finally arrived, and the crowd watched with anticipation. All of a sudden, there was a huge blast, and a giant man wearing a glittered helmet busted through a fake wall. The Shockmaster was supposed to scare the hell out of everyone, but he ended up being a complete jackass. He actually tripped and fell face first into the floor. To make matters worse, his helmet rolled off, revealing his face and ending the mystery before it even began. The Shockmaster never recovered from that. WCW tried to keep him around, but the magic was gone. He went from the terrifying mystery to a joke within 10 seconds. 7. Lord Tensai. Matt Bloom was a serious wrestler who had already played several gimmicks in the past. After a successful stint in Japan, WWE decided to rehire him in 2012. But instead of letting him play the dominant powerhouse, they turned him into a joke. Matt Bloom had become Lord Tensai, a bald-headed Japanese samurai who had weird tattoos on his face. He even had a mute servant named Sakamoto, for God knows what reason. The gimmick felt extremely forced, as Tensai looked more like a cosplay character. He tried his best to show off Japanese culture, but failed pathetically. Every week, he used to come out and do the same shit, so the crowd got bored. They actually started chanting Albert during his matches, to let the company know what a flop this gimmick is. This left WWE with no choice but to drop the whole act. 8. Beaver Cleavage. During the Attitude Era, WWE tried to parody 1950s sitcoms by creating a character called Beaver Cleavage. He wore a bow tie, spoke in cheesy black and white promos, and had weird interactions with his mother. And by weird, I mean creepy. His mom would feed him cereal and he'd stare at her cleavage. The innuendos were constant and the whole thing felt gross. Fans cringed throughout the segment as it wasn't funny or edgy. It was plain awkward and disgusting. In just a matter of weeks, WWE scrapped the character on live TV. They had the guy break character, say he hated the gimmick, and walk off. It was actually their way of admitting they messed up. Beaver Cleavage lasted less than a month, but left a permanent mark as one of the most tone-deaf and uncomfortable gimmicks WWE ever aired. 9. Naked Mideon. After being part of the Dark Ministry of Darkness, Mideon suddenly reappeared in a new gimmick as Naked Mideon. He was a guy running around in a fanny pack and boots, completely nude otherwise. Of course, he wasn't actually naked, but that was the whole gimmick. He would streak through matches, interrupt backstage segments, and make everyone uncomfortable. You could feel the audience trying to laugh, then just sitting in confused silence. WWE played it up as comedy, but nobody was laughing. Even the other wrestlers seemed unsure of how to react. Eventually, WWE dropped it with zero fanfare. Mideon went back to being a backstage guy, and the naked version was never spoken of again. 10. Duke the Dumpster Droese. Back in the New Generation era, WWE had this thing where every wrestler needed a day job. There was a plumber, a race car driver, a dentist, and of course, a garbage man. That was Duke the Dumpster Droese. He literally carried a trash can to the ring and cut promos about taking out the trash. He had zero character depth beyond that. Every match was him trying to act like wrestling was part of his sanitation duties. It wasn't intimidating, it was just boring. The fans never connected. He wasn't bad in the ring, but his matches had no heat. Nobody came to cheer for the guy who looked like he just walked off a garbage truck. WWE gave him a minor push, but soon realized there was no future in this gimmick. Eventually, Droese faded out of WWE TV. No heel turn, no repackage, just quietly removed, like the leftover garbage he always carried. 11. The Bunny, Adam Rose's sidekick. WWE had a flop character named Adam Rose in the early 2010s. He had no charisma, no mic skills, and obviously no technical ability. But WWE gave him one of the weirdest entrances with a bunch of costumed freaks dancing behind him. Among those freaks was a giant bunny, and WWE, for some reason, decided to turn him into a full-time wrestler. It was like watching a Nickelodeon show. This grown-ass man in a rabbit costume was fighting actual wrestlers, drop-kicking the hell out of them. As the weeks passed, WWE teased a big reveal for who was under the mask, but the fans couldn't care less as they didn't pay to watch a Disney character wrestle. Due to this, the bunny just disappeared, and WWE quietly buried the storyline forever. 12. The Red Rooster. Terry Taylor was actually a solid wrestler who was well respected in the business. But when he came to WWF in the late 80s, Vince McMahon had an idea: to turn him into a rooster. The poor guy had to dye a patch of his hair red and act like a complete chicken. This included strutting and clucking like one. He made an absolute ass of himself. and even went as far as bragging that he's the Red Rooster. Fans didn't get it, and even Taylor started questioning what he was doing. The guy could probably beat half the roster, but no one would take him seriously because he was flapping his wings and making farm animal noises. As expected, the gimmick was a huge flop. Terry left the company soon after, and WWE quietly buried the whole thing like he never existed. 13. Mantor. This gimmick was so funny, it almost looked like a Pokemon. The Mantor was just a regular guy in a giant bull's head who charged at people while mooing. He even had hooves on his boots for that special sound effect. WWF thought that this was a really creative idea, and the fans would genuinely be scared. They couldn't be any more wrong. The Mantor quickly became a laughingstock, and the fans almost slept during his segment as he was that dull. He didn't have anything good. His gear, entrance, and in-ring moves were all trashy. Mantor would snort, stomp, and occasionally try to gore his opponent, but the whole thing looked like a middle school play. He lasted a few months and then disappeared. WWE never brought him back and didn't even bother to give an explanation. 14. The Goon. Someone in WWE really thought this one would work. A wrestler who used to be a hockey enforcer. Not a former hockey player, not even a crossover athlete. Just a guy who got kicked out of hockey for being too violent. He wore an actual pair of oversized hockey boots to the ring. Try running to the ropes in those things. The Goon would slide into the ring like he was on ice and throw wild punches like he was still in a hockey brawl. He even had his gloves half-taped like he was ready to fight in the penalty box. The crowd didn't know what to do. They couldn't boo him because he wasn't doing anything evil. They couldn't cheer him because nothing about him was cool. He was just weird. The Goon barely lasted a handful of matches before WWE quietly dropped him. He was one of those characters from the mid-90s who was based on a blue-collar job. It never stood a chance.